It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.
Welcome to this rather special episode 83 of the Lekker Rugby Pod. We call it the season due diligence. Now, Harry, I talked about this a little bit before. Why season due diligence and not season post-mortem? Let's start there and welcome back.
How's it MVA? Because it's not life or death, guys. This is a sport. It's more, and it's a business. So it's, I think, a good analogy to use due diligence. If you were an industrialist, you were looking at buying a couple of factories in the Limpopo, or you're maybe going to go even abroad. You'd want to have a guy like me come in and look at leadership and personnel and happiness factor and the age of the workforce and the benefits and how many times people had sued you, whatever. You'd go through this whole process, and in the end, you'd only be interested in anything if you felt like in the end there'd be return on your investment. Now, we all know that an owner of a rugby team doesn't really get mountains of cash back year on year. So there's other things like satisfaction, feeling of winning, Bruce Craig hugging Johan van Graan after all those years of pouring money in. But I think, you and I, North and South, I think it's interesting to look at the Stormers and the Bulls and just say, I don't know, like, was it worth it? What's next? How good are they? And what are their holes to fill?
Let's start by just briefly explaining that why we're doing the Stormers and the Bulls, not doing the Sharks, because we had a chat with Microscope, the owner of the Sharks, and we're posting that on Sunday. And that's part of where this whole idea of talking about the Stormers and the Bulls from that kind of a perspective as well, because we said it briefly, an owner doesn't see things necessarily the same way as a coach does. We should get back to that. And then just in terms of the Lions, Clinton Scott and I will be doing a Lions, let's call it a post-mortem, because I know there's quite a few new signings and there's a couple of new sponsors on the way. Once we have more clarity on that, we'll focus on the Lions. So we're not neglecting anyone. But for today, you're the man, you're the Stormers man, you're also the rugby fixer, the guy we sent into Honduras with an axe. And if you're wondering what that story is about, it's all in the Rugby Fixer series. Second series coming up soon. I'm the owner. I'm interested. I've got bucket loads of money to spend. I want to buy a rugby team. Looking at the Stormers, what should I be looking out for? What are the gaps? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities and what are the threats? Listen to me with my NBA talk here.
Well, in addition to the fact that our pod is built on the idea of this North-South friendly rivalry, sometimes unfriendly rivalry amongst some of the fan bases, the Stormers and Bulls are always positioned because they have talent aplenty. They have a watershed, a catchment of talent. It's literally the engine that supplies other teams in England and Scotland. So we're looking hard at those teams because we can expect a lot. On a business level, if we were looking at the talent of the workforce and saying, could we recruit? We have it. It's there from high schools, from varsity, from clubs, from desire to live, especially in Cape Town, you can recruit people just for lifestyle. So we don't really like excuses too much. We're more about looking at it. Michael Massotti for the Sharks, wonderful interview. Loved the chat with him. He was a rescue job. He was coming into a moribund, almost decrepit situation and crawling out of the ruins. And he had to start with recruitment of talent, which he did. That's his job. Now it's, obviously other people have to perform and execute. And he can look at it from a 5-year span. Anytime you go from 14 to third, get a semifinal, minus 88 to plus 60, whatever points differential, you have done something good. Then you keep going stepping blocks. Bulls and Stormers different. Stormers won the first ERC, get to finals, dispatched the Bulls at times in playoffs. Bulls has beaten Leinster before in playoffs. This year, they find themselves at the end with another meek quarterfinal exit to Glasgow by the Stormers and sort of a plateau or the beginnings of a plateau for the Bulls, where you look across 4 years and you keep seeing, a bit of an up on win-loss, a bit of a thing to get to the finals again, but this time finals away instead of finals home. Kind of a dip in points differential and maybe a plateau on tries for and tries against. So there's danger signs. And if you were buying a factory, if you were buying a business, if you were thinking of this as an investment, please guys, don't buy a rugby team if you want to get rich, but already be rich and then buy one. But if you were thinking about it, Harry, how much will it lose me? Will it cost me everything? Will I have to hock the house and tell my kids to go back to work? Then, I think we have danger signs. We have things to worry about. I think I would tell you this, that the Stormers have more to worry about than the Bulls. And it's because we have system and people problems at the Stormers, Whereas at the Bulls, I think the system is not bad. It's just that there's specific, incredibly important people problems. Either the lack of someone, or the deficit of something, or the lack of bravery to try something a bit crazy at times, just like you do in business when you want to be first to market, or you want to beat your competitor by hook or by crook, actually, because, love and war. And I think it's worth taking a look now. Why do we do it now instead of a week ago? Because sometimes when it's fresh, when you just lost, you just start throwing babies in bathtubs out. And it's stupid, actually. You lose sight of the fact that the Bulls got where 44 other teams in the top 4 leagues would have loved to have gotten, which was into a final. And they lost, I get it. But it's still every other team besides 4 teams that won their finals. Every other team would have changed places with the Bulls. So I'm all ears. Give me my due diligence. Ask me away what happened and what went wrong and what went right.
Warren Buffett always used to say he didn't worry about the company so much as the people leading the company, the leadership of the company. The leadership starts at the top. Money is now coming to the Stormers. We're talking about the Stormers first. The LaRue family has now invested heavily. Red Disa is now 74% shareholder. Things seems to be on up. So I think on that side of things are financially more secure. So let's not worry about that too much. Let's start with the leadership. And let's start with the coaches. I mean, we should have done this the other way around, but I want to start with the coaches first and foremost, because at the end of the day, they're the ones calling the shots on a day-to-day basis that can determine where the team ends or doesn't end, for that matter. What's the situation of the leadership in that team?
My little baby Stormers. There's something wrong there, but it's not the same thing that's wrong with most clubs. In most clubs, there is a bit of a authoritarianism, and what I say is the word, it's the final, it's the verdict. Don't talk so much, young men. That's not really the vibe of the Stormers. It's a colloquial bunch. It's a band of pirates. It's a lot of characters, and people speak their mind. Honestly, Ben Jason Dixon can launch an arbitration proceeding, lose it, and come back, and you actually believe that everything is fine. There's contractual disputes in the background. There's jostlings and elbow throwing and all that. But in the end, it's kind of a vibe. And that's good and bad. It's good in the sense that you can recruit a guy like Ben Loader, fit in from England. It's going to be fine. You can bring in someone from Fiji or Samoa. It actually would be fine. You could even do something that South African franchises haven't done enough of, which is go grab whatever the equivalent is of Geordie Barrett and land the guy, because there's different stories and different rugby lives. And people like John Dobson. Dobbo's a good fellow. He's and it may be that he believes very much in Norman Laker, the defensive coach. But Lakers, he's not doing anything remotely up to standard at this point in time, because when you're just honest and you look at the numbers of the season, there's another meek quarterfinal exit, points aplenty, leading the ERC in points. There's a certain, what's the right word? Blithe. Dobbo was too okay with it all. And because when you look on the other side, Lakers D was not, if that was Lakers D in the NBA, it'd be 130 points against his team every night. It's the opposite of the fast break. And even the attack itself for the Stormers was set up in such a way, it was built in such a way that it lent itself to turnovers lost. So even though the statistics are gaudy, and everyone would go, oh, I'd love to have scored that many points because the Stormers scored the most points. It's when those points were not really fulfilled and when the attack went awry, the lost ball, the most important problem in rugby, which is that you could lose a ball at any time and they can take it away, is it tended to be lost in awkward spots because, and this is not Laker's problem. Norman Laker didn't make the exit the worst in the ERC. Norman Laker didn't make the scrum the worst in the ERC. Norman Laker didn't make the absence of a maul drive. But I'm saying that's those are synergistic problems between a coach and a coach that sit under John. Now, John doesn't go into the technicalities of what makes the bind on the rib cage work at a scrum. I get that. But he's the guy who picks the guy who does that. Dobbo doesn't sit down and talk about hold fold and the ability to shoot gap and when the umbrella must shut on the rush defense and not having enough of a rush in the rush defense. He doesn't do all that, but he can look from above and say to Norman, this isn't good enough. And I love you, brother. And we know each other. And this is great, but it's not working. Like, we have to do better. How can a Western Province-based, Western Cape team-based have the worst scrum in a competition? Like, how can that be? Literally, we had the best winning percentage of any South African team in Super Rugby for all those decades because of the scrum. Like, you could not come to Newlands and survive the scrum examination. I didn't care if you were the Crusaders. I don't care if you were, the Waratahs, the Reds at their prime. You lost the scrum. And so that was how you survived. So when is that true, and how could that still be true? When you look at it from that standpoint, you do look at leadership, because you wonder about a leadership that doesn't acknowledge something very key, which is an exit strategy is in your control. A scrum excellence is in your control. The negative turnover rate, tougher, because that's a breakdown. And Dion Ferre's old body starting to work down. He's more often injured. Paul de Villiers is still coming up. There's a bit of a succession there, but that's also an area of recruitment. There's tons of people you can put on the field over the course of a season, and you're not allowed to say this. No coaches should be allowed to say this. The reason why our season failed was because of injuries. This is like saying you're going to go into a war and there are going to be no casualties. Oh, he would have won the war, except there were so many casualties. Like, that's something that's baked into it. So, Jake cannot say that and John cannot say that. They literally have to plan around that, supply chains, reinforcements, the ability to force project and force protect. Like, just think of it as a campaign. We call it a campaign. So think about it that way. That's the macro. The macro answer to you is there was insufficient attention to the detail of rugby that is the most doctrinal, the most fundamental, dare I say it, the most sort of why 19B is not as good as the first team in your high school is I exit, I scrum, I lift, I drive, I make my tackles, and I don't lose the ball in the worst spots of the field and then keep pointing to but I scored a lot of points. Like, you did, but you gave away more, or you gave away too many. That's the story of the Stormers team. The Stormers were an average team that were made to look better by, I think, kind of an off year in the Urk. Like, that's my opinion of my own team. I don't think we were as good maybe as even it looks like, where we finished on the log. I think there was a bit of a slippage with Munster not so good, with the slippage maybe in the standards of the comp as a whole.
Yeah, and also the way they ended the season with all those easier games made a big difference. That sort of running towards the end, playing the Welsh teams and the likes. I want to say something about leadership still. Richard Branson once again said he never has to be the smartest guy in the room. He has to have himself surrounded by the smartest people around. The problem that you have, Norman Laker is no couch potato or no slouch. I mean, he was sort of in the running to be England's defense coach. It's not like he doesn't know how to defend. So if the defense is not working, is it Norman Laker's fault or is it the head coach's fault? Same with the forwards. Rita Groenewald, he did very well, been doing well. They won the trophy with him. Now suddenly it's not working that well. Is it his problem or is it the head coach's problem? My question to you is, these second-tier coaches, second-row coaches, call it that, the junior assistant coaches, are they not actually not actually good enough? And the problem is with so let's call it the CEO, the coach of this team, that he cannot manage this effectively enough. Maybe because he doesn't know the game well enough. He's a bit of a good feeling guy going on the vibes. He doesn't get to instill that discipline, or he's not able to drive it. I don't think that assistant coaches are necessarily the problem. I honestly think the problem's with Dover.
Well, yeah, I think it's an interlocked question there. There's a study in industrial relations that talks about how when a manufacturing workforce really struggles and they go back in and they try to really understand why, a lot of times the pit bosses, the assistant managers, the guy on the line is too friendly with the workers and blames everything on corporate. Like, I I know you need new machines, and I would love to give it to you, but headquarters, in Tokyo or Washington, they didn't give it to us. They become so friendly. So the age old of like, how friendly is your boss? And, does he understand? Does he care about you? They go, oh, I love this guy. I love John. John's my great guy. But, it's a lie. He should take ownership, because the truth is, if everyone got a new, state of the art truck, at 250,000 euros, the fleet was replaced today, all at the same time, there'd be no company. You in the meetings, the difficulties, so explain it. So I think there's a gap between head coach and assistant coach at Stormers, but it's the opposite of what you see at the Bulls, where there's too much of a reverence or like I'm not allowed to speak my mind. I think you can say whatever you want to the Stormers, but I don't think insistence on the standards of excellence are sufficiently ingrained, with everyone taking ownership of the shortfalls. So I think Factory Stormer Inc. is not performing up to expectations, because at every level, and it sort of dumbs down, there's a go, well, we were at the finals, we won, we're in the final. Like, okay, at some point that's ancient history, and it's like sad, like, let's stop talking about that. Let's talk about tomorrow and where we are now. When you start out with a loss away to Ospreys, letting in 37 points, let the world cave in. I mean, everyone is going to come on a weekend. I don't care what you were doing. Everything's canceled. Come to the factory. And now we're going to just do something crazy. We're going to knock down a wall or something. You could never do that. And so all season long, it was this idea of getting back to 50%, fall down to sort of 2 wins and 6 losses. And no, it's 5 and 6. We okay now? No. Stupid losses, ridiculous bad selections for Racine 92. Selected a team that just be okay and lose. Now you're out of the only competition you probably have a chance of winning, get hot, and you like Bath taking that trophy, or the Saints making a run. That's the competition the Stormers could have won if they weren't built for an actual war. If they just built for a battle or two, then do that. Pick an actual team where you have your stars instead of just sitting on the bench in Paris having a chuckle. The whole season, it was this idea of, we don't have to be excellent. We just have to be okay. We got to beat the Bulls. Oh, you beat the Bulls 19-16. Now we're good. No, you got 6 wins and 10 losses. How's that good? And you're sitting in the heartland, one of the top heartlands of talent production. You have the best rugby players. You have basically Auckland area of the North Island of New Zealand. You have parts of the south of France, and you have the Western Cape, and you have the northern part of Gauteng, maybe in Dublin area. Okay, that's literally the places in the world that are pumping out over and over. And I would argue the Western Cape would be basically the top 2 in terms of sheer volume of studs, big boys, small boys, quick boys, smart boys, generational talents. So I think when you get excited about beating the Scarlets to go 7 and 10 for the season, I worry. I worry about this factory. Like, why are we okay at being middle of the market when we're top of the market on talent? Yes, I know everyone goes away. I get it. Damien Delende, Peter Steph Toy, Eben Etzebeth, salad days. Wouldn't it be great if they all came back at the same time? Brilliant. Colby, how's it going? But that's not going to happen. But that's okay, because for every one of those guys that are named brands, there's also another guy that's being produced that goes on to be a star in some other club. And so, identification of talent, insistence on excellence. So then the Stormers sort of dug their way back to get to 11-11 by destroying the Dragons. And I'm thinking, why are you so happy? We who were winning a few years back, why is it okay now to sneak in? And then you go into Glasgow and allow Glasgow to beat you 2 points to 1, 2 points to 1 ratio, spank us, pants down, just giving us, bamboo cuts on our bum. And then we are what we are, 50% team. I don't believe that the Stormers' talent base, history, and DNA is a 50-50 team. I think I grade, to answer your macro question, I think that we look at game plan, we look at insistence on standards, we look at training, we look at fitness, S&C, we look at happiness factors, we look at are the players understanding the story? When they walk into their place of work at their factory, the rugby factory, do they understand what the product is, what they make? Do they understand that sometimes it's better to give up the ball than to keep throwing offloads that get worse? I give you an offload, then you get a shittier offload, and by the end, you've got like an F load, and someone's running to the house clowning you because you just keep compounding errors. So I mean, we have there's a list of things that the Stormers can fix. I think your question is different. Reduce cards, got it. Make the second pass, got it. Double the effectiveness of a maul, fix the scrum, got all that. Your question is, are these people that are running the thing able to do that thing, or do they need to bring in someone else? Do they promote Dobbo to the minister of happiness of rugby? The rugby DJ of the Western Cape? Maybe. That's nice. Put his name on something. There it is. Name a stand. But have someone hungrier. On your question about assistant coaches, were they good? How can they turn bad? That's a question that all coaches tell me is super important about refreshment, the sabbatical, the new ideas, being able to talk to your head coach and say something actually new versus just digging in your heels, being stubborn. This is the way that worked at Paul Ruiz. This is what I did in 2012 for Western Province, and it'll certainly work now. Everything changes. The game changes. The shape of the game changes, and you have to keep up. And sometimes we have good research that in coaching, it's good to go away and come back a different man.
When I think about this season, when I think Stormers, the one word that you've used more often than not is the word goofball. And I'm talking in cliches today, but one of the problems of any company for that matter is when the inmates run the institution. And to a large degree, this is what's been happening. They were allowed to play goofball. They were allowed to do crazy offloads and followed by another crazy offload. And they were allowed to get all kinds of yellow cards and everything else. To me, this is a fundamental problem with the leadership. I'll get back to it. You've said I explained it very nicely and everything else. That to me is the major problem. Just picture Rassie Erasmus allowing the Springboks to play a kind of rugby that the Stormers have been trying to play. It would never happen. Why would it not happen? Because Rassie Erasmus is in charge. And Rassie Erasmus is in charge, in bold, underlined, in yellow. There's no question about it. You can do what you want. You come up with nice suggestions. You listen to what he says. But at the end of the day, what he says goes. So it's sort of a compromise with what you mentioned, maybe by the Bulls, maybe, but too much of a my way or the highway, and the Stormers quite the opposite. There must be a bit of a balance there, and I think that's where the problem lies. If you want to look at the technical actual stuff, you said the Stormers, the fundamental problems that they do have, scrums and exits. Basic stuff that any under 16 or under 17 schoolboy can do. Why is it not happening at the Stormers in terms of technicality? It's technical stuff, never mind everything else.
No, absolutely. And I'm not going to blame all the players for having high turnover rates and to consider a guy like Sasha. If you find yourself in the middle of goof troopery, you have to do even more than you want to do. And if you're that talented, you end up trying to do more. I mean, Gelant is a funny player. He's the highlight machine, also the low light machine. But I mean, I empathize with him. If you're not getting a lot of direction, structure, and fundamentals, and you do have that level of talent, and it does create tries. I mean, the Stormers scored the most tries in the ERC. Then, why wouldn't you try to do it? It's mature-minded coaches and trainers and mentors in a factory, in a business, in a life, in a family, in a sports team that guide you and say, hey, guys who are not Damien, Warwick, and Sasha, I need more from you because you're not really doing the things I wanted you to do in terms of building ruck one, deep exit, alles klar, finish, like wrap it up and bow. Like you look at the best exit teams and they end up being in the finals. You look at the team, the number 1 and number 2 scrum, Bulls and Leinster. You look at the number 1 and 2 scrum World Cup, All Black Springboks. I mean, there are some things that are just unassailably rugby. So number 1, worst performing scrum. Number 2, least effective exit. Number 3, negative turnover rate. And number 4, no blindside attack whatsoever. Then you could go second line and say, why are you not making the second pass? Why is it always hero ball? Damien Bacon and shaking, Sasha making you miss. That's great. Hartzenberg, Zas. I mean, these people are hard to tackle in space. But sometimes if all you do is make one guy miss and then you run into a wall, it's a little bit like the Bulls in the final. They beat a lot of defenders, had some great hero ball carries, but they were one-on-ones. Stormers played way too one-on-one. I think it led to the Cards in discipline. And it doubled the fact that every time they conceded a penalty or lost the ball, they were in terrible spots. Nobody behind the ball, no defensive scramble, and they didn't score enough from set piece. I took a look at the stats and just thought, yeah, what would Rossi think about these stats? And what would Alistair think about it maybe? So it's almost like going back to the bad days of Alistair, where you're playing to be a pretty good team. You're playing to be a 55% win rate in the Super Rugby, but never win. And that's what I started thinking about is the rubbish stats were scrum lost by penalty, turnovers lost, tackle percentage, and blindside attack. You know, the good stats were the stats you'd think they would have. Tries, good line-out percentage was great. Meters carried, kicks retained, and then yet the Stormers wouldn't kick enough. Like, one of the best ways to get quick ball and to get behind enemy lines is to retain a kick. And you'd think, well, then we should kick more. No, they won't kick. It'll be offloads. And then finally, tries from kicks. So when kicks were retained, the Stormers were really good at turning that into a try. They did that against the Bulls, and Jake went away from that match saying, wow, the Stormers are really good at that. And then the Stormers stopped doing that in the critical parts of the season. So I think of coaching in that MV. I think it's up to the coaches to tell the players in the middle of the game and while things are going, how to adjust. I don't think it's up to the players themselves to course correct all that. I just think that's difficult for someone in the middle of a rugby match to explain to themselves the shape that someone from the coaching box with the aerial and from the ends who can really analyze. It's up to them at Oranges or post-match to say, okay, we got this. And I didn't see corrective tissue. I didn't see the guts of what that looked like. I never saw people in the coaching stuff like hold themselves to account. So I wondered, how can they hold the players to account? And, you know, and also I think there's plenty of talent. I just don't buy this excuse that, you know, taking Leinster, just put a Leinster to the side. Every other team in the IRC, I don't think the Stormers would go on a field and think those guys across from us are better than us. I don't buy that. I think their talent matches up with Edinburgh, with Glasgow, with the Bulls. You know, I just do not buy that at all. I think it's rubbish.
All right, we've now done the analysis. You're the fixer. I sent you in. You've come back with your axe in hand and your Hilux bucky that you're pushing up the hill there. Another inside joke there from the Fixer series. And what do I do? I'm a possible investor. What would you do to fix this team? You have to make the tough calls now as a rugby fixer. What do you think is the answer?
Yeah, I would basically say there's obviously always space for bringing in more talent. You can always do that. But I would actually look first. I would go into the gold mine of the existing talent before I would so quickly give up on. Take a guy like JD Schickerling. You know, amazing percentages when you look at what he actually does on the field with tackles, with set piece work. Ruben van Heerden, 97% tackle percentage completion. That's ridiculous. 156 tackles. You know, that's like missing maybe a handful of tackles. Ben Jason Dixon's going to miss more tackles, but he's a hair on fire worker. You have the essence of a pack that you can start to build that has an identity of not necessarily bullying people, but out-skilling people, out-hustling people. I would start to rebrand it more like that instead of being so fixated on highlights from the fullback. There is an ability in this pack as a whole, in individual parts, but also as a whole to hunt better as a pack of wild dogs. I mean, there's an ability to do that. I also look at sometimes, you know, what did the coaches want? And I think it was too much evasion, too much value was placed on, you know, Mani, Sasha, Paul de Vet, Sanatla, Hartzenberg, Zas, this idea that you're going to make a move, step someone, and then that's going to be the thing. Like I've said, for every one time there was a try that came out of that, there was 5 times where you ran into a blind alley. So seeing the field, creating almost questionnaires for your team. Would you prefer to lose possession on ruck 4 in the middle of the field? Like literally just don't try to hold on to it. Don't get pinged for holding on. Just literally give it to the guy who's trying to snaffle you. Or would you always hold on and try to sort of fool the ref, get away with it? Or would you prefer to kick on one phase earlier? Or would you have made a different pass to begin with that didn't lead you to that? Like make them go through scenarios, teach them to have the rugby IQ that can then set these guys free. Because I agree that the Stormers have the strike weapons, the finishability of chances that I think the Bulls actually might like in some ways. If you could sort of combine them together, you would kind of like the idea in the final against Leinster to sort of emulate the Saints and take it to the house, instead of just running into walls. But I worry about the Stormers' ability to fall in love with this idea of piercing and penetrating and getting around, but never building that, the hard yard. Turnovers, I think you have to be much more serious about turnovers lost and the over offload. Warwick Gelant did 36 offloads. That sounds wonderful. But I'm telling you, the turnovers conceded off of that, ridiculous. Because 19 turnovers lost hurts you way more than 36 offloads helps you. Turnovers lost, like a guy like Leon Zas, 20 turnovers lost. That ball, when it's lost out there, is so far away from loose forwards, nothing can save you. Hartzenberg, 17 turnovers lost. Similani, 14. There's also, and this is kind of, delicate, but there's a lack of fitness and shape in the back line at sometimes. Too much reliance on athletic superiority and not like getting like, you just ran into Jesse Creel and you said it felt like touching a wall when you got to meet him. You've got to have that level of commitment in the S&C and the off-season training. Stormers should never be less fit than the teams they ran up against. And down the stretch in some of these games, penalties conceded, turnovers lost, and complaining about injuries. A lot of that comes down to health, conditioning. It's sure as shit. It's one of the reasons why you lose the ball, you fail in scrums, you don't maul well, is you're fading at the end of games. So, look, I think these are fixable things. I think a lot of teams would like to be where the Stormers is right now, but my worry is that it doesn't seem like they have formulated for their players a dream, an aspiration, and a achievable goal that they believe in. And they say, we believe we will be in the final next year, and we'll give whoever's in the final with us a hell of a go. I feel like it's modest. Like we'll do our best. We'll see where it lies. We'll see how the cookie crumbles. We should be somewhere, top 5. I don't know if that's good enough. And I don't want to hear one more time about the one we won. I think that's done. But put it away. Put a big thing on the wall. It's great, but refreshment and maniacal, obsessive commitment, along with rugby IQ and shape, a commitment to a shape that works.
You just told me this company team that we're looking at, it's got fantastic assets, but it doesn't sound to me like it's being managed properly. So what I'm saying is, should I just try to do an asset stripping then and just sell it off? Because at the end of the day, you can put all the Springboks in the Stormers. Are they going to perform or not? No, they're not. The problem is not the players. The problem is higher up. What are you telling me about that? Sorry, I have to put you on the spot here.
It's always been wonderful assets in the sense that, it's a place where people want to live. It's a place where people, love rugby. It's an incredibly informed populace. It's always has the most people attending. It's one of the top attending home grounds in the world. There's not even really a need to do brand building and, have a rock concert. I mean, it's going to be packed with people who know their rugby from all walks of life, from amazing communities. And I think I would love to put Dabo there in the idea of, if this makes sense, exporting the ideas of rugby within the Western Cape itself, which still has underserved communities and people who would be good at rugby but don't know it yet. Because it's in the golden age of rugby in South Africa, when you have back-to-back and maybe back-to-back-to-back, seize it, exploit it, get people that would be going to football or would be going to something else, be doing karate or something or UFC, get them into rugby, and people are going to win a strongman contest, that like a lot of that, just get everyone involved. But I think there's a technical deficit. There's a lack of technical expertise at today's cutting edge at positions 1, 2, and 3 in the coaching box. And I think it's head coach, I think it's D coach, and I think it's the set piece. And the line out function, just because, it's just sheer size, talent, athleticism. How can you miss JD Schickerling in the air anyway? Even overcoming terrible throwing sometimes, it just doesn't matter, because when Ben Jason Dixon and Marcel Tennyson lift Ruben van Heerden, he's going to make it. It's going to be okay. I just don't know what they do next. The transitional, the protection of themselves from lost ball, it doesn't feel like they're at the cutting. I don't feel like people are looking at these coaches 1, 2, and 3, the Stormers, and saying, "Ooh, that'd be a good test coach." I don't think they're looking at these people and saying, "Got to have them." So if you look at, Jacques Nienaber, would you like how good would the Stormers be a year from now if someone of the caliber of Jacques Nienaber came in? They would clearly be in the final, like in the grand final or semifinals, and giving someone a red hot go, because they can score the points. That's not the problem. It's stopping the other guy and also knowing when it's okay to kick the ball out. We have a great line out. Let's kick the ball out. And I think, some of the top line out thieves are in the Stormers. Let's attack the line outs. Play like the Crusaders do in New Zealand. Kick the ball out, and then white lock on those guys, try to steal the ball from you.
You've started a campaign last year, I think October, around there, for Johan van Graan to take over the reins at the Stormers. We've spoken to Heineke Meyer, who said he was always was initially a Western Province fan when he was still a boy. And we'll be talking to him on the Lekker Rugby Pod pretty soon if everything works out. So we're looking forward to that. I can see that making the difference. You've got all the talent in the world, all the players in the world. Everything is there. The money is sorted out. The stadium is fine. You can play the Dragons. You still almost have a sellout stadium anyway. Imagine they start winning again, properly, regularly. What difference is it going to make to that team? So yeah, I think that was quite a nice and interesting deep dive. Anything else before we move on to the Bulls?
It was a bit provocative, right? I was tongue in cheek because I'm picking like classic Bulls guys. Although Heineke, it turns out, confesses he's a Stormers fan from way back, Western Province, which I think that shows really good sense and high IQ in him. But
that's what makes me wonder, but yeah, okay.
Johan van Graan is the ultimate tongue in cheek guy. Because when I said it, people said, "Oh, what has he done?" I'm like, okay, now what has he done? And my point is, like, he's a notebook guy. He carries this bloody notebook around all the time. What's in that thing? Like what's in that?
Mm-hmm.
I look at the Stormers coaching box, and I mean, they're all staring at their laptops and yelling at each other and whatever, doing high fives when things work. But I don't see the level of self accountability, hard on yourself, servant leadership, the humility of being corrected by yourself and your peers. I don't know. It seems a little bit too happy, and it's making me sad. I want them to be more sad so I can be happy.
Okay. Now, in the interest of your mental health, let's move on to the Bulls, a team that actually did get to the final for the third time in 4 years. And you, Griffin, pointed out to me it's actually the fourth time in 5 years. Because we lost to Benetton initially. I didn't think of that. I don't understand how that worked all that well. But anyway, let's talk about the Bulls. In the final, came up short, woefully short, totally outplayed. We're not going to dive into that game specifically because that's not what we're here for. We're looking at the franchise as a whole. What's the situation like? You said, once again, the leadership, the financial status, the support basis, the talent, everything else. Let's start like you did with the Stormers. Let's start at the top, working down in a funnel-like manner, like you've suggested, is coaches. technically speaking, leadership speaking, what's the situation, do you think, at the Bulls? Any work need to be done? Any tweaking to be done? Any ejecting to be done or not?
Yeah, so the Stormers, what I'm saying is push Dobson up and out of the coaching box and put him into sort of the good fella situation, the godfather of rugby in the Western Cape, and celebrate his poetic self and his ability to connect. Look long and hard at Norman Laker. I'm not saying the guy has to go, but he has to tell me exactly why the machinery broke in the factory, why it wasn't fixed on time, why he had a guy that wasn't ready for IT to be in IT. Like, take Norman through the gauntlet. I mean, make him sweat. I'm talking about an 8-hour interrogation, full background search. Now, if I'm going with him forward, then I'm good. The Bulls is kind of opposite. In the Bulls, I think there is sometimes a fear of making the big mistake. And so I think people are quiet sometimes and play cool because the head man is really the head man. Jake is, without a doubt, the boss. And it's not colloquial. I don't think it's that easy to give a new idea. Not that I don't find Jake intellectually curious, because I do. I think he's actually very intellectually curious. Outside, he's the kind of guy, kind of a boss. You've seen this kind of boss at a factory or a business that almost trusts the outside consultant more than the inside vice president. I don't know what's going on. Let's get an outside guy to look at something, because it's almost like, I don't trust you guys because you're a bunch of dumbass. like you're not smart enough, And I worry a little bit about the gulf between head man and assistant coach at Bulls. I worry too much about the closeness between head man and assistant coaches at the Stormers. At the Bulls, it's more like I worry about that giant gulf. It's almost like an abyss. Like, what do you know? You do my lineouts. Go do my lineouts. Comb your beard. Do the lineouts. Over there, tackle. How do you tackle? Get a base and tackle. What if the guy with the beard is doing the lineouts is like Paul O'Connell, who's a lineout coach at Ireland, and now I don't know what he is, but he's pretty much second man because he has crazy good ideas. Paul O'Connell studied lineouts like a Victor Matfield would, like I think Andries Becker does. But that doesn't mean you're trapped. That doesn't mean just because you're a lineout guy, doesn't mean you couldn't also be a breakdown guy. I don't know. Just because you yourself were not a breakdown guy at whatever, 6'50", doesn't mean that you couldn't look at someone else. Some of the best coaches, Heineke Meyer was not some great player, but he put on the field every time the Boks played a set piece you couldn't steal from. So, I think there's a way for different people to have different ideas. I worry about the Bulls' ability to game plan and bespoke a game plan for this week and the next week and the next week, shifting enough items in there where Leinster cannot just know it so easily and know exactly what to do. Clarkson, all I got to do is extend Lucid prop long. Bulls don't like being extended. Boom, pancake, we get the penalty. First penalty going against you, the scrum. Oh my God, that's all we had, Second penalty, whoa, crisis. Bulls go into a shell. Midfield, we have Forster and Creel. Every time Forster and Creel were up against anything inventive or different in the season, they struggled. Bulls didn't lose very much, but they lost twice to the Sharks. That tells me that, Leinster could play like the Sharks, but better than the Sharks. Only go 3 phases or less, kick the stuffing out of the ball, make the Bulls play. And just like the first 2 losses to the Sharks, but this time against Leinster, they could do that and counterattack. And Leinster just played it like a fiddle. My worry is being surprising enough. Now, there were some moments. The best wins, beating Leinster 21-20, beating Edinburgh, I thought, 42-33 in the quarterfinal. Some nice nuances, some nice tweaks. And then, of course, avenging those Sharks losses in the semifinal. But then, it just felt like going into the final, there was almost this fear of, geez, I hope we're okay. I hope we do okay. I hope that it's okay. I hope that a year ago when we were at home and lost to Glasgow, I hope that we don't do that. And when you start admitting thoughts into your brain about losing at the final hurdle, You know, it's okay to have those thoughts. It's normal. What if I lose? What if I miss? What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm an imposter? Whatever, all those things, they all happen in our brains. But then you got to go to the next step. And sometimes that comes from the assistant coaches. You cannot just parade the head man in. At Oranges, Leinster had Jacques Nienaber, not the head coach, hammering down up 19-0 as if they were down 0-19. And we all knew that if Leinster scored the next points, because the problem for the Bulls at that point wasn't actually the time. The enemy wasn't the clock. It was actually the scoreboard. You just need to score 7 and then 3, and it's 19-10. It's a normal game. Game on. 19-10, that's okay. You know, the Bulls were down to Edinburgh by more. So Nienaber knew time and place. And Leo subcontracted it out to Jock and said, you do it. So at the Bulls, who's that person? Who's that person who lights a fire and says, this isn't working? Who's the person like who like Felix or Rassi or Jacques who can pull a player in minute 25 and say, tonight it's not working, Goosen. Willie, you're too cross right now. You're just making everyone down. You know, hook, early hook, and boom. That happened to Dwayne Vermeulen. That happened to Eben Etzebeth. That happened to Monty Lubbock. That happened to Andre Pollard. I mean, you cannot go in inflexible to a final. So, successful season. Kudos to the coaches for getting the Bulls into the playoffs and getting to a final. Not good at anticipating something you probably had a whole year to think about, which is you're probably playing Leinster. So maybe making Stedman Gans more of an appearance in the midfield. Maybe having someone who can beat their man one-on-one without getting a card. Maybe your kick chase has to be better. I mean, you're all going to get sick of me talking about kick chase, but I watched the final and I thought, why are you doing one-man chases? And half of the kicks, the man wasn't even in the picture when the guy was catching it. How's that ever going to work in a final? And that is coaching. I'm sorry, but that's coaching, because the coaching there is slow down. Don't load your kick until you check off to your right or to your left and you see your men there. If you're kicking from 10, don't do the quick kick before you have everyone loaded. Talk to each other, There seemed panic modes accruing at various points in the big match. And so, I think it's successful season. Attack was okay, defense was sort of average. Kicking game was good, but then it faded. Scrum was the best in the league. No matter what happened in the final, the scrum was the best in the league. And then I think very, 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 very bad was cards and penalties. So that's what I want to talk about next, because I think it always put the Bulls into a hole in almost every of the big games that they faced, and the losses was that. But that's the story of the season in microcosm.
Right. You said Jake is kind of the godfather. And we're not being derogatory here. He's the guy that everybody turns to and everybody looks at and what waits to be told what to do. But every successful godfather, if you remember all those movies, they have a consigliere, a sort of a right-hand man who can whisper in his ear and also acts as a sort of a go-between between the godfather and the lesser minions, call it that. Somebody who can sort of bring another perspective. If you throw down a puzzle on the floor and you start assembling it, and someone else does it for you, you might be able to see it from a bit of a different perspective, which maybe is what the Bulls might need. What about a sort of a special position there, like not a head coach, not an assistant coach, but a sort of a 2IC coach, call it that, a big picture guy who's not that married to the smaller parts of the game like the lineouts, or maybe one of those guys, like you mentioned, the guy of, once he's combing his beard and the likes, can maybe step up to that kind of position.
The Machiavelli, the count, the courtier that whispers behind the throne, who has no aspirations, by the way, to be the king. This is important.
Very important.
This is the consigliere idea, is the person who knows exactly their role, isn't beating his chest all the time, speaks softly, whispers, and also understands the mood of the king, in this case, Jake, because I think, Jake deserves respect. He has achieved respect and he has one respect. And this is actually a lonely position to be in, because once you get too much that way, no one wants to tell you something like, hey, boss, I think you did something wrong there, because, it's scary to say that, What does it mean? Am I banished to the outer kingdom? Will he still talk to me? Or will his immediate reaction be, oh, you're so stupid. What an idiot. But then maybe the next day he comes back and goes, oh, yeah, I see your point. I think that's a dynamic position. That's probably Jacques and Rossi over the years until there was a time where Rossi could probably be talked out of bad ideas by Jacques. And now maybe that's Felix, maybe that's whoever. I don't know. There's dynamics inside that, but you need to empower your management group. So if you were running a business and you found a big gap between the top and the middle and the first line, I think it's rife for corruption. Not corruption like stealing, but corruption of thought, like corruption where you say things that are not true. Like no one says the thing. The emperor has no clothes. Or, hey, guys, at the Bulls as a team, we get over the gain line, the best in the league, 61, 64%. We're always over the gain line, but we get like the least dominant carries. I want someone to do that and say, we're not changing the subject for the next hour. Let's sit around this table, smart people, and figure out why would a team be the best in the game line, so we don't get stuffed back, but we don't have dominant carries. Like we're terrible at that. Why do we play so tight, second most tight in the league, but our game plan is sort of based on old Bulls buck, kick chase. Maybe we need more players out wide sometimes. Maybe we are being too squished. Why do we, why are we so bad at the penalties and cards? Drill down on that. Here's my suspicion about generations and how we talk, and how a 60-year-old guy can talk to a 24-year-old guy and miss the boat sometimes. Let me just talk about the D word that I hate using when I'm working with teams, and I will not use it, discipline. I don't use discipline, because when I hear discipline, even me actually, from my generation, I don't like being disciplined. I don't like someone telling me what to do. I don't even like you talking about discipline. I kind of want to fight you, break your bamboo stick and beat you as a principal. Because now you're like the principal in a blazer. We're back to ties. I like accuracy. I like accurate violence. This is a violent game. If I keep talking to you about discipline, you're gonna take an edge off your game. You're not gonna try and absolutely bury me, because discipline sounds like an infraction at school. It sounds like you did something too aggressive. I want you so hyper aggressive, like Leinster, where private school boys are coming out of there. They're like starving savages. Every single ball, every scrum, every breakdown, it was like you're dying and you're going to cannibalize someone. But I want you to be an accurate cannibal. I want you to be a precise savage. If you keep talking about discipline, don't be surprised if you have more cards, because you get carded in rugby when you're trying sometimes not to do something. You get hurt more when you're passive. You don't win the shoulder battle that Andre Pretorius was showing us in some of these clips if you are trying to be disciplined, because it's kind of like you're being violent. You're doing something that would get you in jail on the street. So Leinster came and said, we're going to be an intelligent team and we're accurate, but we're going to be hella violent. Bulls came and said, we're like tough guys. One-on-one, we're actually bigger, stronger, maybe superior physically, sort of, out of 10 positions out of 15. But we're going to be really careful. And then you get lost at the breakdown. You get motored, and then you get carded anyway for being a cynical over, like you did too many penalties, so now you're in the bin. I hate the D word in that I like talking to young men about, I want you to win. I want you to win the fight, but I want you to do it precisely. I want you to be accurate. I want you to be like a UFC fighter. You're not allowed to do a downward elbow on someone's head, but you can and should smash them in the face. Now, is that disciplined? Nah, it's accuracy. And you remind that first word, second word, third word is all about winning the physical struggle. Because in the end, the Bulls were a physical, strong, tough, and they lost the final because they weren't physical, strong, and tough enough. That's weird. That's actually very weird to go a whole season based on one thing, and you go to the final, and you have, you end up having a very meek and mild attack. Your defense is just sort of average. You get carded, you get pinged, your scrum collapses for the first time in the whole season, and you forget to chase the kicks. I just worry about that sort of messaging. And I think that is not a head coach's job. Head coach can say macro there. It is each player having someone assigned to them. Maybe one coach has 4 or 5 players that they really deeply engage with in their life, understand their psyches, because this generation of player needs to be understood. They need to be counseled. They need to be understood as a whole person. They like to know why they're doing what they're doing. It's different. It's a different world than it used to be on management in business and in rugby.
Let's talk about recruitment strategies. Jake's been building this Bulls team by recruiting players that are they're either close to being Springbok or they were recent Springboks or on that kind of form. Now, recently, many of these players have now become Springboks. That's put a bit of a strain on the system. And I've lost a couple of those Springboks to injury, like Elrich Lowe, most notably, and Cameron Hanekom. But in terms of their recruitment and also planning ahead, you said they should have known about 6 months ago that they were going to be playing Leinster in the final. And one of the big differences, Jake said, to this year than compared to last year was the fact that he rotated far more. But that still, at one stage, seemed to stop. And I specifically want to talk about a player like Namakaba here. You mentioned Dion Fourie earlier on, started to creak a little bit. The age is starting to show. Paul de Wet being a bit too young. There's a bit of a gap in between, and that was the classic person that was supposed to be there was Namakaba at the Stormers. The Bulls lured him to Pretoria and then never used him. For whatever that might be, if it was injury or player form or whatever, he got a chance against Dragons after many months on the sidelines, put up a man-of-the-match performance, and then wasn't chosen for anything else again. That kind of approach to not rotating your players enough and over-relying, that sort of, isn't it a bit of a, I don't want to call it a panic thing, but yes, it's rather better the devil I know, make sure that it works and give his guys, and you start extending the toll on their bodies. And, every time you saw, like you said, the centre pairing, it's Creel and Foster. How many, knocks can they actually take? And are they actually the best combination? We talked about a 6, Ewan Griffin and I talked about jokingly last night, how would we improve the 6s? And he gave us all these, left field suggestions. And I said, why don't we just pick Namakaba? Isn't that a bit of a blinder situation where I can't see the wood for the trees anymore, kind of a thing? Isn't that a particular problem at the Bulls?
Yeah, I think so. And again, I want to premise all this that the Bulls are a very successful team this year. Came second in the ERC. Would have liked to have seen them done more in the Champions and Challenge Cups, because like Marco told us in the interview that hopefully everyone sees soon and enjoys, Marco Massotti wouldn't have even bought into this whole thing without the Champions Cup lure, because that's where the real money lies. And I think when you talk about those competitions in tandem, you must talk about rotating players, because the key to getting somewhere in both and then having the ability to decide at a critical stage where you're going to go, as opposed to deciding so early, it's just this, not that, well, then you're missing out. So I think that it actually is the key to know how many losses you can afford in the league to still be in top 4. And then within that, top 2. And then sometimes you're not throwing a match in the league, but you can afford to win really tight sometimes and not have to win by 50, because it's not that important actually. Bonus points have been analyzed fully by now, and it doesn't change very much. It's going to be your wins. If you win and you have point differential, you're going to be fine. So I do think Cameron Hanekom had by far the most successful carries in the Bulls. He also had by far the most penalties conceded in the Bulls. He also had by far the most lying down on the ground, a physio coming down in the middle of the game, talk to you times in the Bulls. I don't know what else we need to see from Cameron Hanekom over the season. I think there were moments strategically where he could have been rested, and you saw another guy come on and just see what it looks like, a loose forward is a loose forward. At club level, you don't have to have quintessential 8 and quintessential this and prototypical that. Just get a guy on the field against a team that you're supposed to win anyway and let it roll, So I don't think you have to build so many minutes. A guy like Cobus Visa, what a glue man. What an amazing player of the season. A little bit overplayed sometimes. And in the end, when you really needed him the most, the loss of Visa coming on, obviously, the heels of Hanekom himself was deadly against Leinster, because you're not going to be able to prevail against Leinster if you aren't able to get dominant carries. And Cobus Visa is a dominant carrier. If your line breaks are all coming from wings, probably from fractured play and kick returns, but not really coming from, Harold Forster, or if there's nothing coming, there's no line breaks ever from Harold Forster, then I think recruitment has to look at 12, loose forward depth, because you cannot just keep saying to Marco, hey, I know you have half an arm, but please go out there and ram your fractured shoulder into somebody, because, Marcel, who's also running on about 7% of his connective tissue in his body, is also out there, and Cameron Hanekom has, hamstrings that are literally shot. I do think that's a problem. The line breaks and the defenders beaten developed by the Bulls relied so much on Sebastian, Kanan Moody, and Marcel, actually, along with Cam. I just feel like there was a lot placed on certain players with an almost naive belief that you could play them into the ground. So, I don't know. And also there were people like Ludwig, who is one of the best tacklers in the Bulls. And sometimes I wonder, why isn't he out there platooning a bit? Like how the Boks run, you have 5 different locks. And it doesn't really matter if it's Klein or Achia or Eben or even Peter Steff in a pinch or Nortje. Like, just keep rolling them through. And that way, when it does come time and it's World Cup final and you throw Jean Klein on, you're not worried because he's had enough time in the saddle. Turnovers lost is a big issue, and you have to look at guys like Willie. So the relationship between the coaches, the brain trust of the Bulls, and Willie Leroux is something that I think when the dust has settled, it's fair to look at. Were there times when it was too much, hey, let Willie do something? Because that's not always a great game plan. It tends to make all the other players around him stand down and get smaller. And I think at this stage of his career, he's going to have a lot of off days, more off days than he did when he was 27. Talked to a guy who played on the PGA and said, what's the big difference between the older players on the PGA that makes them want to go on the senior tour? Is it the power? Nah, not at all. He said, senior tour, it's maybe a few meters loss on the power. Ernie Els at 55 is going to be able to hit the ball a mile. It's the putting. It's the recovery, the third day. It's the mentals. It's the grumpiness. It's the being on the road and you don't get the right eggs. So I do think there's an ability there to say to a player like Willie, I need you, and I need you at critical moments, but you still have to play within a system. And you don't get to be like that guy, the goalkeeper in soccer, that's yelling and screaming at everyone around them, the ref included. It puts a bad vibe out there. I think there's so my point there, was about young leaders at the Bulls that could emerge. And that young leader could go to Willie and say, hey, all respect, but shut up right now. This is the team. You're playing in the team. And I wondered about that. So, like a guy like Devin, I would like to see what that looked like. I would like to see Keegan Johannes maybe stay. I mean, I called for that before the semifinal even. Just keep Keegan in there and have Willie on the bench and say, you're the fix-it guy. You come in when things are wrong. You're still important, but you are not, going to sort of make the whole vibe bad. Goosen didn't look fiery enough, in my opinion, to go into Dublin, to Croke Park and do something. No knock on him, but it just felt like Keegan was happy to try. So all those things are retrospect, hindsight. I apologize if I sound like a know-it-all. I'm not. Obviously most coaches would pick the most experienced number 15 and number 10. to pair up with the 9 and manage the game. But I also think sometimes when you think things aren't working and you're already down 19-0, then 22-0, like, why not? Why not go out on your sword? Go out fighting. Don't just act like it was inevitable because they had better players.
I want to get back to recruitment again, because one of the biggest challenges that the Bulls specifically have been facing is player management in terms of compulsory rest periods. Springboks coming back having to have compulsory rest periods. Injuries, you mentioned Ludwig and Rowan Vermaak for that matter. Big number 4s, potential number 4s, Ludwig also an option at 7, but they were both injured till right to the end of the season. Maybe from overplaying, maybe from a serious injury, I don't know. The point is, you have a problem. Jake's biggest problem was getting enough fit players to keep playing the way that he should have. Now they go and recruit Andre Pollard, another Springbok. Not always available. Compulsory rest periods. Your backup fly-off then is going to be Johan Goosen. Sort of, you talked about him not being ready. He was very ginger to me. Didn't look like he wanted to take the tackle, just scared of getting hurt again. So who's left then? It's Goosen and Keegan. And that's why Hugh Griffin and I started joking around with who can we get as fly-off replacements. And there's quite a few at the Bulls. J.T. Plank, Liam Koen, Louis Koen's son. I spoke to Louis Koen the other day. A lot of options there in the Bulls at the moment already. But the point is, as soon as the recruitment strategy then be changing a little bit and moving away from all these potential or ex-Springboks kind of a thing to make sure you don't fall into the trap that they've fallen into now, where you have a 57-man squad that Edgar Rathbun confirmed to us, and you have to be so careful about getting players, keeping players fit and everything else. And most of the time you can't even pick them because they're not available because they play for the Springboks, something like that. That should be something that they must think about.
That's a tough one. So we always talk about, if you're buying a business, you would talk about the people and the system. And so that's a bit of a system issue. But there's another one, an angle, which is the industry as a whole. So sometimes there are problems with an industry. So before you buy a business, you have to wonder about the industry. Is it itself so difficult to manage? In an industry where 2 or 3 of your talent base gets injured every 2 games, enough to be replaced, and in an industry where even though you're a club team playing for a trophy, you're a franchise, there's an overarching specter looming, which is the national team, and the relationship between club and country. It is quite complicated, because what is for the good of South Africa? What is the best interest of Andre Pollard? What is the best interest of the Springboks? What is the best interest of the Bulls? They don't all line up between Bulls, future of the Bulls, Pollard, Box. This is a complicated discussion. It is the essence where the Leinster has more of the advantage, even than the 15 million euros, between 14 and 16 million euros. What Leinster has an advantage there is they are centrally planned inside the Irish system, whereby the national union has for years, within those 10 years, taken on the contract cost of the players on behalf of Leinster. So it's not even on the books. And whether it was 80% or 90%, it was very high. I think people said at Munster all the time that it was almost like 100% when you factor in the tax implications. I don't know. I'm just saying it's a massive benefit. It's a benefit that doesn't accrue to the Bulls or the Stormers. And so that's how it is. I actually think it's fine for Pollard, because Pollard is actually very accepting of just playing the big games. He ended up being that way a bit at Leicester. And he's not a guy that needs heavy minutes to be good. He can come on out of the cold and be fine. Maybe that is the only way to go about this, is to have like a Champions Cup roster, a big knockout roster, critical South African derby roster. And also, like the top 14 teams, you have to win at home. Non-negotiable. Loftus, put down the W, you win. But you have an enormous amount of other games that don't fill into those bills, and that's where you get to test out your young and up-and-coming guys, different combinations within a spine, and people that are just sub Springbok, because they need more minutes because they want to impress someone at the box. So I think there's a way to juggle that. Is it easy? No. Does it take sort of a storyboard of the season? Absolutely. And I think the teams that approach that professionally and and have a storyboard of the season, have non-negotiables, but also have other games where they're absolutely happy to send an experimental side, but not a side bereft of all spine. Have a side that's got basic elements, good framework, but 5 or 6 people in there that no one else knows the names, real newbies. I think that's fine. I think that's R&D.
Mm. I'm glad you mentioned it, because we have to start wrapping this up now. But from this year on, the South African teams are shareholders in both the URC and the Champions Cup. And something you mentioned to me earlier before we started recording was Saints beat Leinster, but they didn't win the championship. At the end of the day, they played in a final in front of 80,000 people, and they made bucket loads of money. And suddenly they're now becoming a magnet for young talent and everything else. Do you think the fact that the South African teams can now start earning money from these tournaments rather than spending money or paying to play in these tournaments could have a bit of a shift in focus maybe? So when the Champions Cup does actually become the priority, because we've been woeful in that competition, let's call it what it was. And like you said, we've always focused rather on winning the URC, except the Sharks when they're completely out of it, 14th on the log, like you mentioned earlier, and went for the Challenge Cup. It's a different story. But the point is, if you can go for the Champions Cup from the beginning, pocket that kind of money, then maybe lift the salary caps, lift the squad sizes and everything else, and make this playing field a little bit more level. Do you think we might see a bit of a change in approach from the South African teams next season?
It should. It must. It shouldn't actually wait until success is achieved to see what a brilliant way it is to go about things. That have 2 bites of the apple. Instead of bemoaning the load, you've got to right size your squad, understand it, storyboard, and then embrace the idea that it's kind of cool, like the Saints, to have not a great season in their league, and then basically be on everyone's. We were all talking about it. It was amazing. It was one of the games of the year so far. And to see them dismantle Leinster, the mighty Leinster, it should give hope to all the teams that have a less expensive roster. I mean, the Saints have internationals. I'm not saying they don't, but they don't have a pack full of internationals. And so I think it's the way it has to be. My suspicion is South African teams, fandom, punditry will only really get behind it when there's a win. Winning solves a million problems. Winning answers 10,000 questions. The reason why you can upsize the ticket prices in Cape Town for the test this year against even the Wallabies is because winning. And it's keep winning and win deep into the Champions Cup. Suddenly the whole thing will go crazy. A deep semi-final Champions Cup match involving the Stormers or the Bulls will be box office, or Sharks box office, massive. And suddenly all the Stormers are the Bulls and the Bulls are all Stormers, because it's cool to see that, and then if it's a final, it's off the hook, it's off the chain, massive crowds, massive saturation coverage, big money to be had. But it just feels like until it happens, the value won't be fully appreciated. Ibn Etzebeth called about this about 2 years ago, saying, really, you have no idea how big this is. We need to stop excuses and just try to win it, because it's massive when it happens. I think even the Baby Cup win by the Sharks ended up being big. It made them get noticed, and it's a feather in your cap. And then one of the teams got to go big in the championship, in the Champions Cup.
All right. I'm not going to let you get away with this. You're my external consultant who I trust more than my vice president. I'm interested in the Bulls as a team, as a business, and everything else. What would your recommendations be? How to fix it, and what should we go ahead and buy it or sell it, or what should we do?
Jeez, I would love to buy the Stormers. That'd be great. Let's do that.
You buy the Stormers, I'll buy the Bulls. I think I know who's going to get the better deal.
Sounds good, man.
So what's your recommendations? Tell me.
No, they're both really good buys in the world of a really bad idea to buy a sports team, by the way. Certainly in rugby. But if you're going to, if that's you have to, it's only within rugby. And it's hard to think of 2 better teams to get into. The road to fix the Stormers, it seems more complicated, but I do think the talent is always there. So it's really about direction and control. It's like composure. It's having more of a boring coach and more of a unhappiness when we lose and standards existence. On the Bulls side, I think it's generational communication style. It's opening more doors, more windows for a bit more spice, just a little more diverse opinions and looks. And for each game in a title run, to actually game plan around that. Don't just say things like, if we do our stuff well, if we handle our business, then it'll be fine. No, I think it's much more matchups. Like the Saints showed you can give Leinster a hiding.
I want to just put something on the record here. Our friend Ringo tweeted the day after the loss against Leinster. Johan Ackerman lost 3 finals in a row and he's revered. Jake White has lost 3 finals out of 4 and everybody calls for his head once again. I am, and I'm not talking on your behalf, but I'm firmly not in the camp of firing Jake White. I think he's the right man in the right position. Maybe a bit of new blood, maybe a bit of new input, but the point is, I hope he sticks around and gets to the final of either of those 2 competitions. Thanks, Harry, man. That was a very, very interesting conversation.
Cheers.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.